Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Isaiah from Mormons. We just did chapter 7 last time, or rather, we did the 7th installment last time, where we just talked about some historical background, and today we're going to get into chapter 7 itself. So, one of the interesting issues, once again, we have to talk about this every time we start a new chapter, is how is this divided? We talked last time about how chronological order is probably not the issue here. We're probably looking at some kind of thematic order, because look at the first verse of this chapter. We find that we've jumped perhaps 8 years in the future, maybe more, because we're talking about King Uzziah in chapter 6, and then suddenly we've jumped entirely over Uzziah's son, Jotham, and now we're talking about Ahaz, at the very beginning of Ahaz's reign. So, once again, we are hopping around chronologically, but because of last time what we talked about, you can remember what we're dealing with right now. That at the end of verse 6, he's talking about how the Assyrians are going to come in, and Jerusalem's going to be, there's going to be nothing left, and even that stuff that's left is going to get taken out, right? Well, here in chapter 7, we're talking about how that is literally going to happen. And so you can see sort of thematically, it makes sense to organize it like this, even though chronologically, it's kind of all over the map. So chapter 6 and chapter 7 don't really tie together. That's a good chapter break. Chapter 6 has a pretty clean break, and then we start with chapter 7. And honestly, there may be some time between 7 and 8. We'll talk about that next time. But that's we have a pretty clean break at the end of 6, and here we start 7. So let's just dive into it here. So here, as we dive into it with the first one, it talks about these kings again, and once again we've skipped a pretty big chronological period to get to chapter from 6 to 7. It says, "And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz the son of Jotham the son of Uzziah king of Judah, that Rezin king of Syria and Pekah the son of Remaliah king of Israel went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim. And his heart was moved, and the heart of his people as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shir-Jeshub thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool, in the highway of the fuller's field." So here we see that in verse 1, I think verse 1 is supposed to be a summary of the chapter. It's supposed to be like, you remember that one time when Ahaz was king, that the king of Syria and the king of Israel came, and they tried to fight against Jerusalem, but they couldn't take it? That's the context of this chapter. I think that's what that's supposed to be. So here, that's really what's going on. You remember I talked last time about how the outcome of this, Syria and northern Israel have ganged up against Judah. So what does Ahaz do? Ahaz calls on the Assyrians to bail him out, and basically God knows, of course, that he's doing this, so he goes to Isaiah and says, listen, the king is going to do something really stupid. You need to go talk him out of it. Because obviously, as soon as Ahaz makes this alliance with Assyria, he's basically a puppet state of Assyria. And so God says, this is obviously not what we want to happen. We want Judah to be an independent nation. They don't need to rely on Assyria. They need to rely on me. I can bail them out. Assyria is not a good choice. Yeah, Assyria can help them against Syria and Israel, but as soon as they're done, Assyria is going to be knocking on their door, because they're going to take out Syria and Israel, and suddenly you have a big, less than friendly neighbor who probably wants your land, right? So this is not exactly the best situation to be in, and so God says, listen, Isaiah, you need to try to talk him out of it. It doesn't happen, but at least Isaiah needs to try, right? So that's the background of this. That Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the king of northern Israel, which is called Ephraim sometimes. That's sort of the rundown of the summary is verse 1 there. This is what happened. They tried to fight against it, but it didn't work. So as soon as the king of Israel, that's what it says, the house of David, and it was told the house of David. That means the king of Israel. So as soon as he heard about it, that Syria and Ephraim had made an alliance. That's what it means. Syria is confederate with Ephraim, so it's an old word for an alliance. So as soon as the house of David, the king of Jerusalem, heard Syria and northern Israel are allies, then he started shaking in his boots. That's how we would say that today. His heart was moved in the heart of his people as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. Basically, that's what we would say is he's shaking in his boots, right? He's terrified that these guys are kind of come in and take him out. So God talks to Isaiah and says, no, you got to go talk him out of this. Go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou and Shurjesha of thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Now, it's interesting that he's supposed to bring his son. I don't even think his son says anything. He just stands there. But his name means the remnant shall return. And in other parts of Isaiah, it seems pretty clear this is the remnant that's left after the Assyrians are come. They're returning to God, right? And so I think this kid is just standing here as a reminder to Ahaz, by the way, before things go bad, why don't you return to God, right? Why is he out there? Why is he at the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field? There are lots of ideas about where this is. We don't actually know where exactly this is, but very clearly, this is the water supply. A fuller is somebody who washes clothes, and a fuller's field is the place probably where the extra part of your water supply would sort of run off, so that you could wash your clothes there. And so this is him trying to make sure there is no extra. He wants to funnel it all back into the city so that you can have a really good sustained water supply to withstand the siege. So he's going out working on the siege, trying to withstand northern Israel and Syria when they're about to attack him, because he knows if they've made an alliance, they're going to attack him, right? So he's going out to work on the water supply, and so Isaiah is going out to talk to him and has his son as this silent witness of, you probably better listen to what Isaiah is saying and return to God right now, because all this tinkering with this water supply isn't going to save you if you don't return to God. So, so he goes out to talk to him, to sort of talk him out of it, and it doesn't really work out super well. And God actually tells him here what Isaiah is supposed to say to the king. He doesn't say to him, "Take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and the son of Remaliah. Because Syria and Ephraim and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, Let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, yea, the son of prevail." So Isaiah here, God is saying to Isaiah, this is what you have to tell the king. So he says, listen, don't be worried about this alliance. Take heed and be quiet, fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands. That there's lots of imagery here talking about a forest, right? He talked about like the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. The idea really is that Assyria is like a forest fire. Assyria is burning through everything. And yet you're sitting here worried about these two little countries, Syria and Ephraim. It's like when a forest fire is happening and you're afraid of a guy with a stick used for poking the fire. That's what that smoking firebrand, two tails of these smoking firebrands. It's like there's a forest fire raging in the background, and yet you're concerned about your friend who's poking the fire with this nub of a burned out little piece of stick that he's been using to poke the fire. It's just kind of utterly ridiculous. You need to be worried about the Assyrians, not about these little small time kingdoms. You have bigger fish to fry than Syria and Ephraim. And he says, don't be worried just because they've teamed up against you. He says, this is what they're saying after they teamed up. He says, let us go against Judah and vex it. That really means this probably should be as cut it in half and divide it between ourselves. That's probably how that should be translated. And set a king in the midst of it, yea, the son of prevail. So the idea is they're going to go in, they're going to take out Judah, they're going to cut it in half, sort of split it 50-50, but then set a puppet king up. But basically they'll have just cut it up 50-50 between themselves. And God just says, this is so ridiculous that you're worried about this. This is not going to happen. You should really not be concerned about it. Like I said, there's a forest fire going on, and you're worried about the little stick used to poke the fire. You need to figure out your life. So he continues here. He says, Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus Rezin. And within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. So basically God says, Isaiah says, this is what God is saying. This whole alliance thing, they're going to try to come and divide Judah. It's just not going to work. It shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus Rezin. So I think the idea is you're worried about these kings, but this is just one guy. You don't really Syria and Ephraim, Syria and northern Israel are not permanent problems. Yeah, you're having a problem with Syria right now because the main city, which is called Damascus, has this kind of hothead king, Rezin. He says, you don't need to worry about this. Within 65 years, 65 years, Ephraim will be broken that it be not a people. And of course, that's exactly what happens. The Assyrians come in and they take out Ephraim. And by 65 years from this point, Ephraim has been so obliterated, you can't even tell that it was supposed to be a people. It's just been completely assimilated into the Assyrian Empire. One thing you have to realize is that assimilation of this kind does actually take a while. A lot of times what will happen is you'll have the Assyrians will make a neighboring kingdom a vassal, basically, a puppet state, and then they'll get sick of it and take it out. And then they'll deport everybody and import their own people from other places and sort of mix it up so that you can't have any sort of national loyalties because you've been scattered, right? And so by 65 years from this point, they're hopelessly scattered and mixed in, and they've lost all sense of their national identity, really. There's some funny things that happen that we'll talk about later, probably, with the people that are imported worshiping Jehovah anyway. But really, by 65 years from this point, everything is totally just destroyed. It says, Ephraim will be broken, that it be not a people. Totally obliterated. Not even recognizable anymore. It says, you're worried about these kingdoms. What you should be worried about is Syria. Syria is not going to give you an issue. Ephraim is not even going to be recognizable in 65 years. You need to be worried about some other issues. Implication, so that you don't become like that. So that you are a recognizable kingdom in 65 years, right? And it says, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. So basically, it says the head of northern Israel is the capital in Samaria, but the head of Samaria is Pekah, this guy, Pekah, Remaliah's son. It's funny that he doesn't even mention his name. He calls him Remaliah's son. He doesn't even deign to mention his name. Kind of funny. But I think the idea, once again, is these guys are not the ones to worry about. These are just guys. These are just people. It's just the kings that are causing you a problem. No matter who's on the throne in Assyria, he's always going to be coming for you. You have to realize that. So you need to not make a deal with Assyria to save yourself. You need to rely on God. He's going to bail you out. And of course, that's eventually exactly what happens. When the Assyrians come in, God does bail them out. We'll get to that later. But Isaiah is trying to get Ahaz to realize, don't try to rely on other kingdoms for safety. Rely on God for safety. And he says, and if you don't listen to me, it says, if you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. The implication here in the Hebrew is, if you don't listen to me, it's not going to end well for you. You are not going to last long. That's the implication. You're not going to last long on the throne if you don't listen to me. And, he stays on the throne, but he stays on the throne as a puppet. And Hezekiah, his son, will try to shake things up a little bit. We talked about that last week. But, he's trying to talk him out of this sort of terrible deal with Syria, and he's not really going for it. So then this is kind of interesting because it talks about what Isaiah is saying as though the Lord were saying it. I think this is more of what God is saying to Isaiah to tell to the king. So it says, moreover, the Lord spake again unto Ahaz, saying, presumably through Isaiah, ask thee a sign of the Lord thy God, ask it either in the depths or in the heights above. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. And he said, hear ye now, O house of David. Is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will ye weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. This is a very interesting section. This is a quintessential example of double coding in Isaiah. So it says, once again, he's talking to Ahaz, and he says, okay, you don't believe me? Ask a sign. Ask for a sign. I'm telling you to ask for a sign. Usually this doesn't happen. Usually guys ask for a sign and it ends badly, right? The Book of Mormon, classic example of that. Guys ask for signs and then they become deaf or dumb or something like that, right? Doesn't really end well. This time God's actually saying, no, I want you to ask. Ask for a sign. As in the depths or in the heights above. Perhaps this is something like, since he's right next to the water, ask for the water to do something, ask for maybe the clouds or the sky or something to do something. I'll give you a sign. And Ahaz says, no, I'm not going to ask, neither will I tempt the Lord. This word tempt here is not quite right. It should probably be like try or prove the Lord. And the idea is, no, I'm not going to ask because I don't believe in the Lord enough to ask him. Right? It's not like, oh, I'm not going to tempt the Lord because I'm pious. No. Why would I ask Yahweh about something? Why would I talk to Jehovah about something? I don't believe in him. Right? That's the implication here. And so Isaiah says, hear ye now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary my God also? Listen, house of David, this is, the government of the kingdom of David, which is to say, Judah, right? Okay, we're having this altercation, but are you really gonna provoke God like this? Right? I'm having to run around trying to deal with you, but are you really gonna weary God too? He says, therefore, okay, fine. You're not gonna ask for a sign? I'll give you a sign. God's gonna pick the sign himself. And that's what we get in 14. Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and shall bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, this is very familiar to us from the Gospel of Matthew, but it's a little bit different than what we think. This would be one of those things, the Ahaz wouldn't have batted an eye, because the word virgin there can be interpreted a number of ways. There's, okay, God's going to give you a sign. Behold, a virgin. Now, this is, in Hebrew, really doesn't mean what we mean. In English, when we mean virgin, we mean something very specific. For them, they also mean something specific, but slightly different. In English, virgin has an obvious connotation of somebody who's never had sex, but here it's a virgin, somebody who has never had a child. So, behold, a virgin, someone who's never had a child, yet shall conceive, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So, somebody who's never had a kid will have a kid, will get pregnant and have a kid, and call his name Emmanuel, which literally means God with us. So that's something that could very logically happen. So, okay, you're not going to ask for a sign, I'll give you a sign. A woman who's never had a kid before is going to get pregnant, she's going to have a kid, and she's going to call his name Emmanuel, or God is with us. But this is an interesting name, we'll get back to this in a minute. But probably the name in Ahaz's mind just means, oh, well, God is with us. Isaiah is trying to get me to turn to God for protection, knowing that God is with us rather than turning to Assyria for help, right? And then 15 he says, butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. This is kind of interesting. When you compare other groups of people that eat butter and honey, this may not also be butter. This may be curds or cheese, kind of a thing. A lot of times, nomadic societies eat this. They eat dried cheese curds, and then they eat honey, so that they get protein from the cheese and they get honey. They get calories from the honey and things like that. So it's a very, very, very good traveling food, but it's what nomads would eat. So he says, this woman's gonna have a kid. She's gonna call his name Emmanuel. He's gonna be a nomad, probably is what that means. Butter and honey shall he eat. Presumably, he's gonna be a nomad. And then it makes a funny comment that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good. almost like, obviously nomads are the best kind of people. You have to understand that in the context of the Old Testament, this is exactly right. The best thing to be is a nomad. Think, for example, just think about the rest of the Old Testament. Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden taking care of it, but they don't really understand the world until they go out and they have to become pastoralists. They become shepherds and they take care of sheep. And remember, God asks them to sacrifice a sheep, right? So it's only when they become shepherds that they become like good and virtuous and figure things out, right? It's when they're agriculturalists, when they're taking care of the garden, that things aren't going, that they're not living up to their full potential, right? Then what happens? Cain, the farmer, kills Abel, the shepherd, right? The agriculturalist kills the pastoralist, right? When the Israelites leave Egypt, they're leaving bad agricultural country, Egypt, these bad farming agriculturalists, and they're becoming the awesome pastoralists. The shepherds, they're the good ones, the shepherds. And this constantly is happening in the Old Testament. And so by the time of Isaiah, it's just assumed if you're a shepherd, you're better than somebody who's a full-time farmer. So he's a shepherd, so obviously he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. Kind of an interesting comment on their society at the time. For before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. So he says, there's going to be this kid. He's going to be, right now, there's going to be a woman. She's going to get pregnant. She's going to have a son. She's going to call his name Emmanuel. He's going to be a shepherd, which means so he's going to be awesome. But before he even knows good from evil, before he's even really taken on the shepherd's trade enough to know good from evil, both Syria and Israel, those kings, those specific kings that you were worried about, those guys are going to be kaput. So why are you so worried about this, right? So he's giving him a specific date before the kid even knows good from evil. Israel and Syria are not going to have, those kings are going to be gone. Why? Because the Assyrians are going to have taken over. So both those specific kings, those two guys that he was worried about, those guys are going to be gone. Right, so that's why he specifically names the kings earlier on, because it's the kings that are the problem. And he says, listen, these two kings you're worried about, those guys are going to be gone. The Assyrians are always going to give you problems. So you need to realize that you should just not worry about these guys. It's the Assyrians you need to be thinking about. Now, but you're all thinking right now, what about Matthew, right? Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel? This is Jesus, right? Well, yes, it is Jesus, but this is a classic example of double coding. So Isaiah is talking to Ahaz. Ahaz is definitely not up on his scriptures. He doesn't know about the Messiah. Hasn't picked up the book of Moses recently, right? He doesn't know what's going on. So when Isaiah talks to him, he says something that makes perfect sense to him, right? Totally logical argument. But Isaiah is actually making fun of him without him knowing it. So he says, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. Once again, this is a young woman. A young woman shall that's never had a baby before. That's the word virgin there. A young woman who's never had a baby before will become pregnant and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, this means God with us. But in Matthew makes a point of, he quotes this, he talks about the story of the Holy Ghost coming upon Mary. Mary conceives, and then it quotes this and says, well, and then, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And then he makes a point of interpreting that, which means God with us. Now, we usually focus on the virgin there because I think there's a little bit of a misinterpretation there. But the major issue is Emmanuel, God with us. A young woman is going to conceive, and she's going to have a kid, and that kid is going to be God with us. And that's exactly what happens. Mary has Jesus, who, in his past life, as it were, was Jehovah. He was God. So God literally was with them in human form when Jesus was born. And that's why Matthew emphasizes the name, Emmanuel. He makes sure you know what it means, because that's the key. Not necessarily the virgin element, that's what we usually look at. The key is Emmanuel. God with us. God is literally going to be born. He's going to be with us. He's going to be a wanderer. Jesus was a wanderer for his entire adult life. But he doesn't even really have a home. He specifically mentions that, right? Birds of the air have nests, and foxes have holes, but I don't have anywhere. The Son of Man hath not a place to lay his head. Right? Jesus was what we would call a homeless person, probably. He's probably living with his friends. He's not like, somebody living on the streets all the time, although sometimes I get the impression that he does just kind of sleep where he can. He kind of just sleeps wherever he can sometimes, I think, but he's not, he's kind of a wanderer. So once again, the idea of the noble wanderer here, I think is interesting. And then it says, before the child shall know to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land that thou abhorrest shall be forsaken of both her kings. Well, before Jesus is grown, remember, he's born, he runs away to Egypt to get away from Herod, and then when Herod dies, he comes back. So I think this is a little bit of a dig against King Ahaz. So yes, in this case, there's going to be this kid, and before he's grown, Israel and Syria are going to be forsaken of those kings that you hate. But Judah, your country, Ahaz, the king of Judah is going to die. Later on, when Jesus is here, it's the king of Judah that's going to die, and that's going to be the good news for him, right? A subtle reminder of Ahaz's own mortality. Obviously, he doesn't pick up on the joke here, but this is, I think, a classic and very artful example of double coding. Once again, we usually look at that word virgin as being, well, this is somebody who's never had sex before. In Hebrew, that's not the meaning. In Hebrew, that means somebody who's never had a kid before. So the emphasis, I think, is on they'll call his name Emmanuel. A young woman's going to conceive, have a son, and call his name Emmanuel. Literally, God is going to be physically with us because Jesus is going to be born. And he is going to be a wanderer like this. And the king is going to die. And it's going to be good news for him, right? So, very, very interesting example of double coding here. And once again, people probably would have been able to pick up on this. If you were up on your scriptures, presumably they had a lot more than we have. Presumably you could have picked up on this. Obviously his audience isn't. His direct audience, Ahaz, isn't. But I think his sort of secondary audience is definitely going to pick up on this. And that's why Isaiah continues to do what he does and drops little hints like this periodically throughout the text. So then Isaiah continues by sort of reminding him of the dilemma he's in. Once again, trying to persuade him not to side with the Assyrians, not to make this Faustian pact with Syria that's going to make him a puppet king. In 17 he says, "The Lord shall bring upon thee and upon thy people and upon thy father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria." He says, you're worried about Ephraim right now. You should be worried about Ephraim. The king of Assyria is coming for you. This is like nothing you've ever seen before. This is not like anything that's happened since Ephraim split away from you guys. You need to be worried about Assyria, not these other guys. "And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. And they shall come and shall rest all of them in the desolate valleys and in the holes of the rocks, and upon all thorns and upon all bushes. In the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired by them beyond the river, by the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard." So he says, in that day, very shortly, as soon as what has happened that he said was going to happen has happened, as soon as this land has been forsaken of both her kings, before this kid is even grown, the Lord is going to call in the Assyrians on you, and it's going to be worse than anything you've ever seen. And it's interesting. It says, "And it shall come to pass in that day the Lord shall hiss for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt." We have seen this image before. He's going to hiss for the enemies of Judah to come in and take them out. So he's going to call call out for the fly that is in the uttermost part of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. The Egyptians and the Assyrians are going to come in. And we see this. There's this back and forth between Egypt and Assyria at this time. And, of course, Judah's right there in the middle, and it becomes the battleground. And it's like God is going to call these guys in, and they're going to descend upon you like flies and bees. Egypt is just the flies in Egypt. They're just clouds of flies all the time. It's been said the miracle that Moses performed in Egypt was not calling the flies in, it was getting them to go away, right? There's so many flies in Egypt. And that image of flies and then the bees from Assyria just hovering over everything, just covering everything. And that's really what happens. They have these massive armies, for the time, massive armies, and they swarm in and take things out. That's the image he's painting. Everything, all these places, totally worthless places, desolate valleys, holes of the rocks, thorns, and upon all bushes, because that's where bees live, right? They tend to live in these nooks and crannies and in bushes and places like that, right? They have their nests in these nooks and crannies, and then they descend upon all the bushes and all the trees to get the flowers, right? That's the image here of these everything just descending upon Israel and Judah, specifically Judah once Israel is taken out. So it's this terrifying image, and once again trying to remind him, you need to be worried about other things right now. These guys are going to come in on you, and you should be trying to deal with these guys, not with these small fry Israel and Syria issues. They're going to descend upon you like bees and flies and settle everywhere. They're going to cover the land, right? It says, in the same day shall the Lord shave with a razor that is hired. God's going to shave with a borrowed razor. God is the one that's going to take you out, but he's going to use somebody else to take you out. And who's he going to use? Them beyond the river, the king of Assyria. And here you have to understand something. He paints an image of shame. He's going to shave with a razor that is hired the head and the hair of the feet, and it shall also consume the beard. You remember that one time when David is hanging out, he sends some embassies down to talk to the king of a neighboring country, and they think that the embassies are actually spies, right? So what do? They cut off the guys' beards, they shave their beards, and they're super ashamed that their beards are shaved. Also, he tears their clothes in an unfortunate spot. But they were really ashamed about their beards being shaved, and they're like, oh, David, we can't be seen in public without our beards. And so David says, yeah, okay, you stay here until your beards grow back, and then come back home. Okay, so God, the idea here is God is going to bring shame upon you. He's going to shave your head. He's going to shave even your feet, and he can shave your beard. You're going to have no hair left. This also, besides just being shame, a lot of times if you were a slave, you would get stripped and shaved and then sent into exile. So this is a very terrifying image for them. They know that this is the kind of thing the Assyrians are doing. So this is going to be a terrifying image for him. So God is going to shave with a razor that is hired. He's going to humiliate you and take you into bondage, and he's going to do it, by this borrowed razor, by the Assyrians, them beyond the river, the king of Assyria. So beyond the river, we think of the Tigris and Euphrates as being way over east, and they are, but they go all the way to the sort of northernmost boundary of Israel, depending on how generously you interpret that boundary. So then beyond the river is then just right over the border. They're really not that far away. So the river here is probably the Euphrates, okay? So really not that far away. The Assyrians are just kind of right there, and they're going to come in and they're just going to obliterate everybody. And I think also he's literally talking about them being shaved when they go into captivity, but also I think metaphorically, just like there's going to be no hair left on your entire body practically when you're taken into captivity, So there's going to be no people left, sort of shaving the people off as one might shave somebody's head. Right? There's going to be no people left. Everybody's going to be taken away, and that's obviously a terrifying, terrifying image. But and to show kind of the desolation we get here in verse 21, it shall come to pass in that day, a man shall nourish a young cow and 2 sheep. It shall come to pass, for the abundance of milk they shall give, he shall eat butter. For butter and honey shall everyone eat that is left in the land. It shall come to pass in that day, every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines and 1,000 silverlings, which shall be for briars and thorns. With arrows and with bows shall men come thither, because all the land shall become briars and thorns. And all hills that shall be digged with a mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and the treading of lesser cattle. So he's basically saying everybody is going to be gone. A man's going to nourish a young cow and 2 sheep, a comparatively small amount of cattle there, of livestock, but then they're going to give all this milk, and so he's just going to eat, once again, butter. This is probably dried cheese curds. He's going to eat dried cheese curds and honey, and everyone is going to do this that's left in the land. Why? Because suddenly the pastoralists have no competition. Everybody's dead, and so now it's all just desolate country that's used as rangeland. That's the image. All the farms, all the vineyards, everything's destroyed. It's just desolate country that's used as rangeland. So the animals have so much food, you can live off of honey and dried cheese curds. But the implication is you have to, because that's all there is to eat. Everybody's a nomad now. The whole system's been destroyed. It shall come to pass in that day, every place shall be where there were 1,000 vines and 1,000 silverlings. So all these places where you had 1,000 grapevines, and the land cost you 1,000 pieces of silver. That's really what that is. Vines at 1,000 silverlings. You've got 1,000 grapevines on land that cost you 1,000 pieces of silver. And now it's just for briars and thorns, which is like scrub and brush. It's going to be good for nothing but grazing. And in fact, people are going to come hunting there. It says in the next verse. All these places that used to be so nice, all these nice vineyards, totally worthless. With arrows and with bows shall men come thither, because all the land shall become briars and thorns. It's just going to be good for grazing and hunting. It's going to be all overgrown again, because all the farmers are going to be gone and dead, and all the farms are going to be destroyed. It's sort of reverting back to this sort of chaos. It's just going to be good for hunting. And all the hills that shall be digged with the mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending forth of oxen and the treading of lesser cattle. So there's kind of a gradation of how the agricultural system worked in the ancient Near East. I think we've talked about it before, but I'll bring it up again briefly. All these places are built kind of on mountains. So the very top of the mountain you have the city. Slightly below that, the land is not that great, so you have grazing land. So it's obviously the very top is all just rock. You can't really grow anything. Can't even really graze animals there, so you build your city there on the worst land, right? Then, right next to it, you have grazing land. Then, as you go down the hill more, the land gets slightly better, so you terrace it, and you have vineyards and olive trees, and then the very bottom area, you usually have small streams with sort of little floodplains, and that's where you grow your grain. So you're seeing kind of a reversion away from that all the agricultural stuff is kaput now. So instead, so people are hunting where you used to have grazing and olive land, and now down in the bottom land, the sheep and goats and cows and everything are just eating all this grass that's growing because nobody's there to farm it anymore. It's all just become wild again. So that's, I think, the idea. And that last verse, and all hills that shall be digged with the mattock, there shall not come thither the fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the setting forth of oxen and the treading of lesser cattle. These places where they used to hoe the ground to plant grain, yeah, they're going to hoe the ground just to kill the weeds so they can use it as grazing land. I mean, kind of mind-boggling at that time. They were producing a fair amount of food there. But Isaiah is saying, nope, that's not the way it's going to be. Everything is going to be totally, totally desolate. It's just, people are just going to, all that land, all that nice, beautiful grazing land, people are just going to use it just for agricultural purposes, just for pastoral purposes. I mean, all that good agricultural land is just going to be for raising cattle. So it's a very kind of disturbing image. But once again, it ties back to his idea of these big wealthy landowners that are grinding the faces of the poor, as he says. Yeah, those guys are going to get wiped out. And the shepherds, the nomads, the poor nomadic shepherds are going to take their land and graze their animals there. Once again, that same theme that's been running through the entire beginning of the book of Isaiah pops up again here. And I think that is there's no coincidence. Like I said, I think we're talking about thematic organization here. I think it's arranged thematically so it makes sense that this would come in here. This really is kind of the end of a thought. The next chapter, 8, starts off with some other things, but that's just kind of something to think about here, that we sometimes become very comfortable. And I think Isaiah is trying to shake us and say, no, don't become comfortable. Don't rely on other exterior forces to save you. Rely on God to save you. And if you don't, you're not going to make it. If you rely on your money, you rely on your alliances, you think these things are going to save you, they're not going to save you. Only God's going to save you. So you need to figure that out and act accordingly. And I think that even though he's talking about military defense in this case, I think that for us that's never been more applicable. We need to rely on God to save us. We need to accept the fact that all these other things that we might rely on are just eventually going to fail us, and only God is going to save us. Anyway, that's it for today. This is chapter 7 of Isaiah for Mormons, and we will see you guys next time.